When he was just 29 years old, Sabeer Bhatia, the guy who created Hotmail, basically became a legend in the tech world. He built something totally new and sold it for a mind-boggling amount of money. But here's the thing. If you ask him how he did it, his answer is going to throw you for a loop. So let's get into it and unpack the pretty controversial guide to success from one of tech's original game changers. $400 million. Let that number sink in for a second. That's the figure that put Sabeer Bhatia on the map. It's what Microsoft handed over for his startup, Hotmail, way back in the late 90s. I mean, that's a number that launched 1,000 entrepreneurial dreams. And, of course, it leads everyone to ask one simple question. So, what's the secret? What's the magic formula? You know, the playbook that a new generation hungry to make it big can follow. You'd probably expect a list of business hacks, maybe some killer investment advice. But Bhatia's answer? It just flips all of that on its head. And there you have it. The man who made an absolute fortune says, point blank, I do not know how to make money. He claims it was never his goal in the first place. He argues that this right here is the biggest difference between his mindset and so many others. So, if it's not about the money, then what on earth is it about? Well, that brings us to his first and maybe most important principle. He says success isn't about a number in your bank account. It's about a choice you have to make between two completely different life paths, chasing wealth or pursuing happiness. And he says you really have to pick one. So here's how he breaks it down. On one side, you have the chase for wealth. He says this just turns into a toxic game of keeping up with the Joneses, always comparing what you have to others. It's a road to unhappiness. But on the other side, pursuing happiness. He says that's just a state of mind. It's about finding that minute-to-minute satisfaction. And when your mind is happy, when it's free, that's when the truly great world-changing ideas pop up. And, kind of ironically, that's what ends up creating real, lasting wealth. He really drives his point home with a pretty stark reality check. He points to these billionaires who die in their 50s or 60s. He's like, look, they chased the money, sure, but they did it at the expense of their own health. For Bhatia, the ultimate currency isn't the dollar. It's a long, healthy, happy life. The main takeaway here is to switch your number one goal from getting rich to being well. This whole mindset leads right into his second major point, which is a takedown of what he calls the copycat culture. Bhatia draws this really sharp line in the sand between a trader mentality and an innovator mentality. He basically argues one just moves money around while the other actually makes history. He describes the trader as someone who just knows how to buy low and sell high. They copy what's already working. They're focused on the deal. And he's really blunt about it. He says in Hindi, smart nahi hai, badmaash hai, which basically means that's not smart, that's just being a rascal. The innovator, on the other hand, is all about solving deep, fundamental problems. That's the Silicon Valley spirit he talks about, thinking differently to actually change the world. And he does not hold back, especially when he talks about big companies that he thinks are just gaming the system. He says when a business gets ahead by, twisting regulations to kill off their competition instead of just building a better product, that's not innovation. In his own words, it's a system that works like the mafia. It's built on power and control, not on genuine creativity. So where does this whole copycat culture come from? Well, according to Bhatia, it starts way back in the classroom. He's very critical of an education system where you succeed by just memorizing and spitting back answers from a textbook, instead of being taught how to think for yourself and come up with your own original ideas. He believes this is what kills innovation before it even has a chance. And that brings us to what Bhatia sees as the single biggest roadblock of them all. He describes this pervasive culture of fear, where rules aren't there to guide people, they're there to intimidate them. And this fear, it just strangles creativity. And believe me, he has a very personal story to back this up. Get this. In 2010, Bhatia launched a new company called Jax SMS. It actually had more features than WhatsApp at the time, and it was blowing up. We're talking 1.5 million users in just 3 months. They were on track to completely dominate the market. But then, the Indian regulators shut them down. Just like that, all over how they interpreted a single rule. Bhatia calls this a catastrophic mistake, a potential $600 billion opportunity for India, just gone. all because of bureaucratic fear and a total failure to understand what innovation looks like. And this quote right here really captures the heart of his frustration. He's describing a system where the automatic answer to anything new is no, where fear crushes any kind of risk-taking, and intimidation is just a tool for control. And in his view, no country can ever really become great under those conditions. So, okay, after all of that heavy criticism, what's Bhatia's solution? He's not just complaining. He truly believes the country's potential is absolutely massive, but it can only be unlocked by a deep, fundamental shift in how people think. He lays out this 4-part path to get there. It starts with you, with a personal choice, to think differently and to chase happiness instead of just money. Then it needs to scale up. He says leaders have to actively get fear out of the system. And finally, the entire culture needs to change, from one of jealousy to one of collaboration, where people are helping each other succeed instead of trying to pull each other down. He even applies this to that famous idea of India's demographic dividend. You hear politicians talk about the country's huge population as its greatest strength. Bhatia says that's totally meaningless by itself. The real dividend, he argues, is the unlocked creative and intellectual power of 1.4 billion minds, a power he claims the country's current leadership has no idea how to tap into. So what's the big payoff for all this? Well, Sabeer Bhatia makes a pretty bold claim. He says that if this mindset of happiness, originality, and fearlessness really took hold, it could turn India into a global superpower in just 5 years. It's a hugely controversial vision from a guy who has always gone against the grain. So the question he leaves us with is a big one. Is he a visionary who sees what others don't? Or is he just dreaming?